The war began without warning. One day the skies above the frontier worlds were quiet, and the next they were filled with fire. Fleets of alien ships crossed the borders, tearing through colonies with weapons the humans had never seen before. Reports spread like wildfire: cities gone, space stations burning, families lost in silence. Every soldier was called to fight. Every civilian was told to prepare for hardship. Among those soldiers was a young human assigned not to the front lines, but to a diplomatic envoy. His task seemed simple compared to the chaos outside. He was to stand guard, silent and steady, while the envoy spoke words of peace in courts filled with tension. Yet even in that role, danger followed. The galaxy no longer trusted humans, and humans trusted no one. When he first saw the alien princess, he thought she was part of a dream. She entered the hall surrounded by armored guards, her crown glowing faintly with embedded crystals that pulsed with light. Her long silver blonde hair fell like a river over golden armor, and her eyes carried a sharpness that could pierce through steel. Every step she took echoed with authority, but there was also something fragile in the way she held her breath. Before she spoke, the human stood among his fellows at the edge of the chamber, helmet under his arm, trying not to draw attention. But her gaze moved across the hall, and for a brief second, her eyes met his. It was only a glance, yet it felt heavy, as though she had measured his worth in a heartbeat. The court proceedings were tense. The princess argued with her council over whether peace with humans was worth the risk. Many of her people called humans dangerous, unpredictable, even savage. The human soldier listened, his jaw tight. He knew their words were born from fear, yet hearing them spoken so boldly made his chest ache. Suddenly, a shout broke through the hall. A messenger rushed in, armor scorched, and cried out that enemy raiders had broken the outer defenses. The court erupted in chaos. Guards scrambled, council members fled, and the princess rose with fury in her eyes. Her crown caught the light, and for a moment she looked like both a queen of war and a child cornered by fate. The human and his squad received orders instantly: protect the princess at all costs. He gripped his weapon and stepped into position near her side, the golden glow of her armor only inches away. She looked at him once again, longer this time, her lips parting as though she wanted to ask why he stood so calmly when others panicked. They moved quickly through the stone corridors of the palace as explosions shook the walls. Dust fell from the ceiling, and the sound of battle drew closer. The princess walked with stiff dignity, though her fingers trembled as she clutched the jewel on her chestplate outside the palace gates. Raiders poured through the streets, alien mercenaries with savage eyes. The human squad engaged them, blasters flashing, steel clashing against steel. The human soldier fought with a focus that surprised even himself. He moved not only with duty, but with something stronger, an instinct to shield the princess. At one moment, when a raider broke past the line and lunged toward her, it was he who threw himself forward. His blade struck true, and the enemy fell. Blood stained the stones, and for the first time, the princess saw a human's courage not in stories, but in action before her eyes. She did not speak, but her gaze lingered on him, as if trying to understand why he had chosen her life over his own safety. As the battle raged, they were forced back into the palace gardens, the air thick with smoke and the cries of the wounded. The human's armor was scorched, his arms heavy, yet he stood between her and every threat that approached. The princess, proud as she was, could not ignore it. She finally spoke, her voice sharp yet uncertain. "Why do you fight so fiercely, human? Is it duty or something else?" The question struck him harder than any blade. For a moment he almost answered, but the words caught in his throat. Instead, he only raised his weapon again as more enemies appeared. The truth inside him was still a storm, waiting to break. By the time reinforcements arrived and the raiders were pushed back, the garden lay in ruins. The princess stood among broken statues and burning flowers, her crown tilted, her armor smudged with ash. The human soldier, breathing heavily, lowered his weapon. Their eyes met once more, and in that silence, something unspoken passed between them. The unexpected war had begun, not only across the stars, but within their hearts. Neither of them was ready for what would come next. The palace burned long into the night. Smoke drifted into the skies, and the sound of battle still echoed from the city beyond the walls. The princess stood on the balcony of her chambers, her face lit by the red glow of fire. Her people had never seen their capital so shaken, and neither had she. Inside the chamber, the human soldier stood watch, his weapon leaning against his shoulder. His armor was dented, scratched, and blackened by soot, but he remained upright, eyes scanning every shadow. The princess stole glances at him, unsettled by the way he stood so calm, so steady. As if fear had no place in him, she had been raised to believe humans were reckless and primitive. Yet this one moved with discipline and quiet strength. He had thrown himself in front of blades meant for her, not once hesitating. Why? The question burned inside her, but pride held her tongue. Before she could speak, a sharp knock rattled the door. One of her advisors burst in, panic on his face. "Princess, we must leave now. The raiders have breached the eastern wall. They will be here within moments." The princess's heart tightened. The palace guards were scattered, her council was broken, and her people were fleeing into the hills. She turned toward the human soldier, expecting him to look at her for orders. Instead, he stepped forward and placed himself between her and the door. "We leave through the servant halls," he said firmly. His voice was low but certain. "If they capture you, the war ends before it truly begins." The advisor bristled. "You dare command the princess? Know your place, human." The soldier's eyes flashed, but he did not argue. Instead, he looked directly at the princess. For a moment, her pride screamed to rebuke him, yet something in his tone made her pause. He was not arrogant, he was determined. Against her own instincts, she nodded. "Lead the way." They slipped into the narrow servant corridors, thinly lit and lined with stone. The air smelled of smoke, and the distant thunder of enemy footsteps grew louder. The princess's golden armor clinked softly as she moved, but the soldier kept a hand raised, signaling her to quiet each time danger neared. At one turn, voices echoed close by. The soldier pressed her against the wall, shielding her with his body as raiders stormed past. The princess froze, her breath catching in her throat. His chest was inches from hers, the heat of his presence surrounding her. For the first time in her life, she felt small yet safe. When the danger passed, she whispered, "Why risk yourself so foolishly? You could escape and live. My people are not yours." The soldier's jaw tightened. He looked at her with eyes that carried both fire and sorrow. "Because life means nothing if I watch you fall." Her lips parted, stunned by the rawness of his words. No courtier, no suitor, no knight in her world had ever spoken so plainly. She turned her face away, her heart pounding, unwilling to let him see her shaken. They moved again, but their path was soon cut off. Raiders flooded the corridor from both ends, weapons raised, eyes filled with hunger for victory. The princess lifted her chin, ready to face death with dignity. But the soldier stepped forward, blade in hand. "Stay behind me." The fight was brutal. Steel clashed against alien blades, sparks flying in the darkness. The soldier fought with everything he had, parrying and striking, his body a wall between her and their enemies. The princess, though untrained for such close battle, picked up a fallen dagger and stood ready. Twice she struck down foes who got too near, and twice he pulled her back from danger. When the last raider fell, the corridor was littered with bodies. The soldier's breath was ragged, his arm bleeding from a deep cut, but he stood tall. The princess stared at him, her chest heaving, golden hair tangled and streaked with ash. "You saved me again," she whispered, her voice trembling. "Why do you keep doing this?" You owe me nothing." The soldier wiped blood from his brow, his expression unreadable. "Because you are more than a crown. You are. You." Her heart stumbled at his words. She had been worshipped as royalty all her life, but never seen as a person. Never acknowledged beyond her title. His answer disarmed her more than any blade could. Before she could respond, an explosion shook the palace walls. The ceiling cracked, stones tumbling, forcing them to flee deeper into the tunnels. The princess stumbled once, and without hesitation, he caught her hand. His grip was strong, steady, and warm. For a moment, she did not pull away. Together they escaped into the night, slipping through hidden gates into the dark forest beyond the city. The palace burned behind them, its towers collapsing one by one. The princess stood among the trees, her crown tilted. Her heart pounding not only from fear, but from something she could not name. She looked at the human soldier. His face streaked with ash, his eyes unyielding, even in exhaustion. For the first time, she realized she was not only his charge, she was his choice. And deep inside, she wondered if she wanted him to stop. The forest was silent, broken only by the crackling of distant fires and the calls of strange night creatures. The princess sat beneath a tree, her golden armor smeared with soot, her crown set aside. The human soldier stood a few steps away, watching the shadows. His blade rested across his knees, but his eyes stayed alert, scanning every rustle of leaves. They had run for hours, slipping through secret paths until the city was nothing more than smoke on the horizon. Now in the quiet of the forest, the weight of what had happened pressed down on them both. The princess folded her arms across her chest, staring at the soldier as though she might read his soul by force. "You fight like a madman," she said at last. "You throw yourself at death again and again." "Why?" The soldier did not answer immediately. He took a slow breath, his gaze fixed on the fireflies drifting through the trees. Finally he said, "Because I refuse to lose what matters." Her eyes narrowed. "And what matters to you, human? You have no throne to protect, no bloodline to preserve. Why risk yourself for me?" The words hung in the air, sharp as any blade. The soldier clenched his jaw, his silence saying more than words. The princess leaned forward, her voice dropping lower, almost daring him. "Say it, human. Do you love me?" The soldier stiffened. His fingers tightened on the hilt of his blade. For a moment, his eyes flicked toward her, bright, unguarded, filled with emotions he fought to bury. Then he turned away, the firelight casting his shadow long and uncertain. The princess's heart raced. She had expected him to laugh, or to protest, or to claim loyalty as any knight would. Instead, his silence struck deeper. Silence could mean denial, but it could also mean truth too dangerous to speak. "You cannot ignore me," she pressed, rising to her feet. "I am your princess. When I ask a question, I expect an answer." The soldier finally looked at her. His eyes were steady, but his voice was quiet, rough with restraint. "And if the answer is not what you want to hear?" Her breath caught. She had been raised to command armies, to bend men and women to her will with a single order. Yet this human stood before her, unflinching, refusing to give her control of his heart. The realization both enraged and fascinated her. Before she could push further, the sound of movement stirred the night. Shapes appeared among the trees, enemy scouts, armored and armed, drawn by the faint glow of their campfire. The soldier rose instantly, blade in hand. "Stay behind me," he ordered. The princess bristled at being commanded, but there was no time to argue. The scouts surged forward, weapons flashing in the moonlight. The soldier met them head-on, steel clashing in a storm of sparks. His movements were precise, every strike fueled not just by duty, but by something deeper. The princess grabbed a fallen spear and fought beside him. Though untrained, she moved with surprising grace, her golden hair whipping through the air. Together, they cut through the scouts, their bodies moving in strange harmony, his strength shielding her, her speed striking when he left an opening. When the last enemy fell, the forest fell quiet again. The soldier wiped blood from his blade, chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. The princess stood close, her dagger still trembling in her grip. Their eyes met in the moonlight, and the unspoken question returned stronger than before. "You protect me as if I were more than a crown," she whispered. "As if I were more than a burden. Tell me, human, why?" He shook his head, his voice low. "Because if I say the truth, everything changes." She stepped closer, her hand brushing against his arm. Her touch was soft, hesitant, but filled with fire. "Then let everything change. I command you answer me." The soldier froze. His heart thundered, his lips parting as if the words might escape. But before he could speak, a horn echoed through the forest. The princess's guards, battered but alive, had found them. Torches lit the night as soldiers poured into the clearing, rushing to shield her. The moment shattered. The soldier stepped back, his eyes hardening, his secret buried once more. The princess stared at him, her chest tight. Realizing she had been close to hearing what no one else in her empire had ever dared to speak. As her guards surrounded her, she lifted her crown again, her face set in the mask of royalty. But inside, her thoughts burned with his silence. His refusal to answer was not a denial, it was proof of something powerful, something real. Something that frightened her more than war itself, and though she would never admit it aloud. She longed for the day when his silence broke. The princess returned to her people with her head held high, but her heart was no longer steady. The guards led her through the ruined outskirts of the city, their armor dented, their faces weary. Every survivor bowed as she passed, whispering her name like a fragile prayer. To them, she was still their shining hope. To her, she felt like a figure trapped between two worlds. The human soldier walked at her side, silent as ever. His armor bore scars from the forest fight, his blade still streaked with blood. He kept his eyes forward, never speaking unless necessary. Yet she felt his presence as if it pressed against her soul. Each step they took together was heavy with words left unsaid. When they reached the safety of the mountain fortress, her council rushed forward, voices rising in anger and fear. They demanded to know why a human had been allowed so close to her, why she trusted him when his kind were called reckless and unworthy. Some shouted that he should be dismissed, even imprisoned. The princess silenced them with a raised hand. "He saved my life when you could not. He stays." Her words stunned the council. The soldier bowed slightly, but his eyes flickered to hers, gratitude hidden beneath a mask of calm. Yet the moment she spoke, the court's eyes sharpened. Rumors began to swirl through the fortress, rumors of a bond too close, of a human who stood where no alien dared. That night, she sat in her chambers, staring at the stars through the narrow window. The war stretched across the galaxy, but her mind was caught on one man. His silence haunted her. His eyes told stories his lips would not. The door creaked, and she turned sharply. It was him. He stood in the doorway, hesitant, as though entering her chambers was a crime. "Forgive the intrusion," he said softly. "I only came to report the guard's rotation." She rose from her chair, crossing the room with slow steps. The golden glow of the lanterns caught the edge of her crown in her eyes. "Do you always speak to me as if I were only your commander?" she asked. He frowned, unsure. "What else should I call you?" Her voice lowered, trembling with a mix of anger and yearning. "You should call me what I truly am to you." The soldier's breath caught. He looked at her, and for once, he had no shield. His silence filled the chamber like a storm. "You hide behind duty," she pressed, her eyes burning into his. "But I see it in every strike of your blade, in every step you take to shield me. This is not only duty. Say it, human. Do you love me?" For a long moment, he did not move. His jaw tightened, his chest rising and falling with heavy breaths. Then he whispered, If I say yes, everything changes. Your people will despise me. Your throne will condemn you. And this war will not forgive us." Her heart raced, her hands trembling. "Then let them despise. Let them condemn. I do not care for thrones if they chain my heart." He stepped closer, his shadow falling over her, his eyes locked on hers with a fire that shook her. Yet before his lips could form the words, a horn sounded from the courtyard below. Alarms rang through the fortress, another attack. The moment shattered again. The soldier straightened, his eyes hardening with duty. He grabbed his weapon and rushed for the door. The princess clenched her fists, torn between rage at the interruption and fear for what waited outside. Together, they ran to the walls. Enemy ships descended from the skies, pouring fire into the mountain passes. The fortress shook as cannons roared. Soldiers scrambled, the air filled with smoke and battle cries. The human fought at her side again, cutting through raiders with ferocity. But even in the chaos, their words lingered. Between the clang of blades and the thunder of war, her mind replayed his whisper, "If I say yes, everything changes." And though she had shouted her defiance to fate, in the depths of her soul, she knew he was right. His love would tear the galaxy apart. Her heart wanted him, but her crown demanded sacrifice. As the night burned, the princess realized the truth. She was no longer fighting only a war for her people, she was fighting a war within herself. The fortress held through the night, but victory brought no peace. By dawn, the halls were filled with whispers. The council had gathered, their faces hard with suspicion. Word of the human soldier's closeness to the princess had spread, and now it could no longer be ignored. He stood in the center of the council chamber, stripped of his weapon, but unbowed. His armor was battered, his face streaked with smoke and blood, yet his posture was firm, his eyes steady. Around him, alien nobles muttered angrily, their voices rising. He walks too near the princess. He dares speak to her as though he is her equal. His kind cannot be trusted. The princess sat at the high seat, her crown resting heavy upon her brow. Outwardly, she looked calm, her expression carved from stone. Inside, her heart pounded. She had not expected the rumors to spread so quickly, nor had she expected her council to act with such fury. An elder rose, his voice cold. "This human has overstepped his place. He is no knight of our order, no son of noble blood. Yet he stands where none of us may stand. We demand an answer, princess. Why do you keep him?" The princess's lips tightened. She wanted to speak boldly, to tell them of his courage, of the countless times he had saved her life. But the council was not asking for bravery, they were asking for blood. If she defended him too strongly, it would confirm their suspicions. Then another voice rose from the crowd, sharp and merciless. "Let him prove himself, or let him confess. If he serves only as a soldier, let him swear loyalty and nothing more. But if he dares to hold a forbidden bond with you, princess, let him admit it before us all." The chamber fell silent. All eyes turned to the human soldier. The princess's heart twisted. She knew what was coming. She had pushed him again and again to speak, and now he would be forced to. For the first time, she feared the answer, not because she doubted him, but because the truth would destroy them both. The elder stepped forward, pointing at the human. "Speak now. What binds you to her? Is it duty or is it desire?" The soldier stood silent, his eyes fixed on the floor. The chamber waited, tension heavy as stone. The princess gripped the arms of her chair, her knuckles pale. Finally, he lifted his gaze. His eyes met hers, and in that look she saw everything. The nights in the forest, the battles fought side by side, the words he had never spoken. His silence was no denial, it was a shield. The elder's voice grew harsher. "Answer, do you love her?" The princess's breath caught. The council leaned forward, their faces hungry for scandal. The soldier's jaw tightened, and then slowly he shook his head. No. The word cut through the chamber like a blade. A wave of whispers swept the court. Some nodded in satisfaction, others looked doubtful. The elders leaned back, their anger cooling, though suspicion lingered in their eyes. But the princess froze, her heart aching as if struck. She knew the truth. She had seen it in his eyes, felt it in his hands when he pulled her from danger. His voice denied it, but his silence before had spoken louder than words. When the council was dismissed, she remained seated, staring at him as he was led away. Once the chamber emptied, she rose and followed him into the shadowed hall. "You lied," she whispered, her voice sharp with both anger and pain. He turned to her, his face calm but his eyes burning. "I said what I had to say. If I spoke the truth, they would condemn us both. You would lose your throne. Your people would lose their hope. I will not be the reason you fall." Tears stung her eyes, though she refused to let them fall. "Do you think your denial protects me? It does not. It breaks me." He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Better a broken heart than a broken kingdom." She stared at him, trembling, torn between striking him in fury and pulling him close in desperation. For the first time in her life, she did not know which was right. Before she could answer, a messenger rushed into the corridor, breathless. "Princess, the enemy fleet approaches. They march not for the fortress, they march for you." The soldier's eyes hardened, his hand instinctively reaching for a weapon that was no longer his. The princess's heart pounded. The war outside had returned to claim them, but the war inside her burned fiercer still. The fortress trembled as horns sounded from the walls. Enemy banners rose against the mountains, their armies pouring through the valleys like a black tide. The princess stood on the battlements, her crown gleaming in the dawn light, her people gathering behind her. Yet even as the storm of war loomed, her thoughts were not only on the enemy, they were on him. The human soldier stood at her side once more, now armed again, blade in hand. He had been released from the council's custody when the alarm rang, for even his enemies knew they needed his strength in the coming fight. His face was grim, his eyes scanning the horizon. But when he glanced at her, the mask slipped, and she saw the storm in his heart. The council pressed her for orders. "Princess, the walls will not hold. We must retreat into the tunnels. You must live your bloodline is all that matters." But she shook her head. "If I abandon them now, my crown means nothing." Her voice rang clear, steady. Yet inside she wavered. She was not only a ruler, not only a symbol. She was a woman whose heart was chained by unspoken truth. The battle came swiftly. Fire rained from the skies, stones cracked beneath the cannons, and the enemy surged forward. The princess drew a blade from the armory, fighting not as a distant queen but as one among her people. The human soldier fought beside her, every strike fierce, every step unyielding. Together they stood where the wall was weakest, their movements flowing as if bound by more than steel. Yet the enemy was endless. Soldiers fell around them, and the fortress groaned under the weight of destruction. The council shouted for retreat again. The princess turned, her chest burning, her eyes falling on the soldier. "Say it," she whispered, almost lost in the roar of war. "If we die here, let me hear it once." His blade cut down another foe, his breath heavy, his eyes locked on hers. For a heartbeat, time stilled. Then he spoke, his voice raw, unshaken. Double quotes, "Yes, I love you." The words struck harder than the enemy's weapons. For a moment, the battlefield disappeared. The princess's chest tightened, her heart flooding with heat and fear, and something she had long denied. She had demanded his confession again and again, yet hearing it now left her unprepared, trembling as if the ground itself had vanished. Her lips parted, but no words came. She had commanded kings, silenced generals, bent armies to her will, but one man's love left her powerless. The enemy pressed harder. breaking through the outer wall. The human grabbed her arm, pulling her back toward the inner gate. "Live, princess. If you fall, they all fall with you." But she stopped, turning to him with fire in her eyes. "No, not princess. Not crown, me, you love me." He stared at her, his chest heaving, the battle roaring around them. Then he nodded. "Yes, you." With that, she raised her blade and called to her people, her voice thundering across the fortress. "Stand! Fight for your homes. Fight for your lives. Today, we do not fight for thrones, we fight for love, for the bonds we choose." Her cry ignited the soldiers. Exhausted men and women straightened, their weapons lifting once more. The council, stunned, could not stop her now. The fortress roared with renewed strength, a fire born not from command but from something greater. The battle raged until nightfall. Against all odds, the enemy broke and fled, leaving the mountain fortress scarred but unfallen. Smoke curled into the sky, bodies littered the ground, and silence slowly returned. At the heart of it all, the princess stood with her crown tilted, her golden armor cracked, her blade heavy. The human soldiers stood beside her, bloodied but alive. Their eyes met, and in that moment, the war outside seemed small compared to the truth between them. She stepped close, her hand trembling as it brushed his cheek. "You should have kept your silence," she whispered, though her eyes shone with something softer. "I was not ready for your truth." He caught her hand, holding it firmly against his face. "Ready or not, it was always yours." Her breath shuddered, her crown slipping as she leaned into him. The woman who had been raised as untouchable royalty finally allowed herself to be seen as simply herself. Around them, soldiers bowed their heads not in shame, but in respect. They had seen the fire of a human's love turn the tide of battle. They had seen their princess's heart break chains heavier than iron. The war was not over. More battles would come, more trials would test them. But in that moment, beneath the fading light, the princess and the soldier stood together, not ruler and servant, not alien and human, but two hearts bound in defiance of a galaxy. And though she had not been ready for his words, she knew she would never again wish them unsaid.